kind of make the profits, but also to ensure that we look after people and that we're doing the right things by the planet as well. So we're very curious and interested in how we're going to be working in India with this methodology too, and we hope that we will engage with some of you on this webinar today further around that. So one of the hypotheses that we have in today is around this thing called VUCA. And if you haven't heard of VUCA yet, it stands for velocity, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's a term which is bandied around an awful lot of the Western world today in relation to the conditions of the economic environment today. And the majority of our clients are really struggling to work with very changed economic conditions. And I know India is actually prospering quite well at the moment, but for the West, it has been a few years now of great uncertainty, and organisations and people really having to adapt to changed rules. And so there's lots of talk about VUCA, but actually there's something more around just talking about the experience of VUCA, which is this uncertainty, which is this stress, which is this, we need change. There's a need to actually get right underneath what that is actually about, and perhaps facing a reality. And this is something which us humans find quite difficult, is to actually reach that deeper level of facing the reality. So our hypothesis really for today is that the vast majority of leaders are not actually prepared for the reality that is going to face them in the next decade, and actually is facing them today if they actually choose to look at it. Whether you call that reality things like the global warming, or the difficulties with sharing resources around the world, the oil crisis, who owns the oil, who doesn't own the oil, what's going to happen to us as a planet. There are many things which are actually really impacting business today, and hurting people financially too. So this is a big issue for us here in the West at the moment. But the bigger issue, or part of the issue, is how do we actually get leaders to work with this and to access parts of themselves and their teams and their organisations that have resources to offer to work with this level of innovation that's actually required. How do we get to that depth to work with people in a way that feels okay, that feels able for people to reach, in a way that they understand, in a way that they can get on board. So the other hypothesis that we put forward is that the amount of innovation and change that we're going to see in the world in the next 10 years, largely driven by powerful technologies and discoveries, really is calling for a level of consciousness within leaders, and a level of elevated responsibility towards social purpose, environmental value, and not just the financial profit. So back to what I was saying just a few minutes ago about the need for balanced attention to people, profit, and planet. And the way that many organisations are still largely led today is looking after financial profit for the short term, and less attention to the long term. So one of the challenges that we are often asked to look at with our with leaders that we work with is how to get them to look more at long-term issues. And when you start to look at long-term issues, you have to look beyond the walls of the organisation. It's not enough just to look at what's happening within your organisation. So organisations start to see that they need to work inter-organisation with industry partners, that change can only happen if their whole ecosystem starts to embrace change. And actually change is happening, whether we like it or not, but it's the ability and the attention to change that is really what's going to count here. So we really have to raise our consciousness and level of leadership above the problem that we're actually experiencing today in order to solve it. So in short, what we're asking here is for leaders to take a much greater level of responsibility in the way that they're thinking strategically in their organisations. and to make that link between how an individual leader or person even thinks in an organization and the impact of that, not just on the team, not just on the organization, but on the industry and the economy. So how does what one person thinks about in Bangalore actually impact what might be happening in Paris or Milan or New York or wherever? And so this is where we get into systems thinking and to always start viewing ourselves as being connected beings. Now I know in India your philosophy is much more akin to working in that way than perhaps to the West, where people tend to be more, I suppose, separated in not seeing themselves as connected beings as much. So perhaps it will make more sense to you. Why is change so hard? Well, when we look at the way change has been handled in the past, it typically has had what we call a broadcast approach or a one-directional approach, whereby a management team, a leader, will come up with a strategy, a direction that they want to take, and they tell people what that's going to be. And so you have the man on the cartoon here with the foghorn shouting and telling people that they've got to change. But the reality of that is that it actually doesn't work at all. And the vast majority of change programs that have been managed in that way generally fail. And the statistic here from McKinsey that only 1 transformation in 3 succeeds. And the reason, the vast majority of the reason why for this is that human beings don't naturally want to change. Although it's part of our innate programming, we are naturally programmed to evolve, to grow older, to change, physiologically. Mentally, we find it really difficult to get out of our comfort zones. We automatically seek the security of the familiarity of the old habits. And so in an organizational life, we seek to kind of, I suppose, work our working life according to the rules that we know. But the problem that we face today is that the economic environment is calling for a very different set of rules, largely connected with how we work with uncertainty. So we need help to actually learn a new set of skills that's going to help us as individuals to change and to understand ourselves, not just to be told that we need to change, but actually to develop individuals to help themselves change and evolve with the environment too. And the other reason that a lot of change initiatives fail is this very frequent gridlock where people are so busy trying to keep up with what they're trying to keep up with that they can only attend to the urgencies. And so a short-term focus really gets entrenched. And in an environment in which we're trying to control is actually an environment that we can no longer control. The extent of change in the external environment is so extreme. The pace of technology, the speed of, I'm sure you're all experiencing speed of work yourself, and the speed at which you're expected to respond to things. It's really, really challenging. And so what happens is that the addiction starts around the short-termism, that we get stuck in doing short-term work and we're not paying enough attention to the long-term, such that important issues are missed and unresolved issues build up. So there is no strategy. And I can tell you, with all of the senior leaders that we coach and work with, it's a very sad statistic that the vast majority of them are really unprepared strategically, because short-termism has become a real habit in the last 20 years, as we kind of tend to deal with what's right in front of our noses and trying to cope. So what we have here is a corporate behaviour, which is actually preventing the organisation from getting anywhere near where they need to be in order to work with change, both strategically, thinking about what they need to do, but also to actually prepare themselves psychologically and mentally for the new skills and the mindset that they're going to need for the future. And so this is the hypothesis that we have. And the kind of change that we're talking about is game-changing change. So there's two kinds of changes that we could talk about in organisational life. And the vast majority of change which is addressed today in organisations is what we call continuous improvement. It's largely doing what you've already doing, or improving what you've already got. And that's fine when external, internal conditions are largely stable and the same. It's just a variation on managing the status quo. However, when you've got the level of change geologically, technologically, socially that we have in the world today, it's calling for complete innovation and to be able to respond to challenges in a very different way, be able to enter complexity, to work with ambiguity, and to build what we call an adaptive capacity for rapid and constant development. So to be able to prototype things quickly, to test things quickly, to change them quickly, and to keep changing. So instead of launching a product in year one and trying to keep working on that project in year three, that project may actually be futile by year three. It may have worked in year one, but you may need something else again. So you need to have a constant approach towards innovation and change. This also affects decision making, and the vast majority of decision making is geared towards certainty and working with either what we call best practice or complicated solutions. This matrix that you see in front of you is called the Canova Matrix by a chap called David Snowden, who lives in the UK. And it helps us to understand, it's an emerging framework for helping us to understand the kinds of decision-making levels that we need to be aware of. So let me just explain it to you briefly. It's what we call best practice. This is where the relationship between cause and effect is really, really obvious. It's pretty simple. You know, the light bulb has stopped working, we replace the light bulb. It's a simple solution to a simple problem. Then there's complicated, which is top right. The relationship between cause and effect requires some analysis, but there is a known solution to the problem. You might need to do some digging, but you know that there is a way of solving that problem. So, you know, if the wiring has gone, if you're trying to change, if the light bulb has gone out and you've changed the light bulb, but you can't work out why the light isn't working, perhaps there's the wiring that's gone wrong, or a fuse has gone wrong. So there's something else that you can check to get what the solution is. However, in complex thinking, which is what we're talking about in the changed world, the world of today, where there's huge uncertainty, we need to be able to really understand that the relationship between cause and effect can only be perceived in retrospect. So things will only make sense once they have happened. So it's like you've got a whole jigsaw that you're trying to put together, and you're trying to bring these pieces together without knowing what the solution is. You may have a sense of what the future might bring, but you don't have answers. You don't necessarily have certainty. So it's much more emergent, and you need to go on a journey to help work with that emergent practice. And then there's what we call novel practice, which is there's absolutely no perceived relationship between cause and effect. It's completely new, and that can be quite chaotic. So we need to find ways to be able to stabilise extreme uncertainty in that way. So what we're talking about in terms of helping people to work in new conditions is how people work with the left-hand side of this matrix, how we work with being able to figure out what's going to happen in the future without any certainty, and how we work with potentially chaotic scenarios. You know, what happens if an earthquake happens? You know, how are we going to work if we have to kind of quick displacement of people? And these may seem like big things, but you know, these are very real problems in the world today. The other thing that I think is really hitting people psychologically is around the reduction of job security. Again, this may be something which is a little bit different in India, but certainly in the West, where people largely knew that they had work and they would have a job for life, or if they didn't have a job, they'd get another job pretty quickly. This whole level of certainty has completely gone, and so it's really hitting people very hard. And as it hits people hard, there's a lot of fear building up. So with uncertainty, you get massive anxiety and massive fear. People are afraid of what's going to happen in their future. They're afraid of losing their jobs. They're afraid of not being good enough. They're afraid of trying new stuff. And so all this fear and anxiety is being juxtapositioned against this need for massive innovation. In innovation, you need people to be hopeful. You need people to dream. You need people to take risks, to try new things. And so, you know, what we've got is a climate of how people are feeling naturally, which is actually preventing what the environment needs. And this is why, to kind of really tuck into it and get into it, we really need to get into some deep level of work with people around their mindset, around how they feel about what's going on at the moment. And for leaders, how on earth they are going to help people to feel hopeful when there's a lot of destruction happening at the moment. And so I love this quote here. This is from Adyashanti, a philosopher. Make no mistake that enlightenment and awareness is actually a destructive process. It has nothing to do with becoming better or happier. It's about crumbling away of the untruth. So removing all the facades, all the pretensions that we might put up as almost barriers to the world, to somehow say that we are okay, when in fact we might not be okay, we might need help. And in order to work with others, we need to remove these barriers, and we need to be able to work with each other in much more authentic and trusting ways. And so this is largely about helping us to reduce the ego so that we can work together. And it's no accident that I'm sitting here today in the UK and I'm from Ireland, and you are largely in India, because we need to work together to make the world a better place. We can't do it just from Europe. You can't just do it from India. You know, we have to learn to work together to do this. And by the way, you have as much to teach me as I might have to teach you. Although I'm doing the webinar today, hey, you have an awful lot of wisdom that I want to know too. And for us to know each other, we have to release our egos and to engage in conversations in different ways. And so this is the work that Xenergie is involved in, is helping people to really engage in conversations in new ways. But you know what? It's a very human journey. Change is a journey. It is not a project plan. It is like sailing a boat across very treacherous waters, and you do not necessarily have a map of where you're going. You're going to have to read the stars and look for the signs. Teams are a really effective vehicle for this journey because they help us to see ourselves, they help us to see each other, they motivate us, and team members are always connected to other people. So in terms of building influence, teams are very, very powerful vehicles for change and transformation. So when we're looking at helping leaders and executives to reach the inner space of change, we have to help them really to work with teams. And back to this idea of the destruction. As we work with teams, as we reduce our ego, as we start to understand this is a journey, we start to understand that this is about entering into another world. It's like a pilgrimage, and I put this slide up here about what we call the Celtic Imran, which is an ancient Celtic tradition, which taught the art of living and dying in order to transform. It worked with the dream world, it worked with the imagination, and it was almost like a rite of passage. And pilgrim quests are done the world over, not just in Ireland, the world over. We go on journeys, rites of passage, in order to find the answers to things. And these journeys help us to access the unseen. They help us to access our unconscious. They help us to access universal resources that are available to us that we do not use. And just because we can't see them does not mean to say they are not there. Just like the iceberg, what you see on the surface is not necessarily what is there underneath. So in our work at Xenergie, we're really interested in this stuff that's happening underneath, because that's where deep culture lies. That's where deep transformation lies. And crossing the threshold to really innovate and to change mindset involves a journey to really get in touch with this unseen bit. So this could be stuff like, what is the unseen part of organizational life? What are the conversations we're not having between us? Why is there conflict in the organization? Why are we not having enough time to look at the strategy? What happens when the leader is really, really worried about the future? How does he keep his anxiety, prevent that from impacting his employees? Because unconsciously it will travel. And there's a lot of work done on neuroscience today which proves that, you know, emotion is an energy which travels right across the organization, whether we like it or not. It does. It is. And so when we talk about social responsibility, we're actually talking about taking responsibility for our thoughts, our feelings, and our minds, so that we can be as resourceful as possible, and to start seeing that we are connected beings. So we're looking to help build leaders who are really there to be of service to others. And one thing I do know about India is what a wonderful service culture you have, and I think you have an amazing philosophy there around service that could really be of service in the world, and I would love to see that going much wider. So back to this idea of the learning journey, and this is back to I suppose our work at Xenergie, is that the journey, this transformation journey, accessing the deep place, is about taking teams to this place. And so this graph here shows roughly what the journey looks like. And you know, instead of a change project, as I say, being a project plan, it's actually a journey which goes through lots of ups and downs. The green part of this diagram, at the top part where it says optimism, is what we call above the surface. So like the iceberg, that's what you can see above the water. The red part, which is pessimism, is the stuff which is really, really tense and difficult under the surface. It's the stuff that we might be afraid to say. It's the stuff that we don't really want to look at. It could be maybe thinking about, well, actually the technology that we use today is going to be completely useless in 3 or 4 years' time, but we're doing nothing about it. It's voicing the unspeakable. It's getting teams to be able to work with real diversity between them, and to accept that no one person is right, that everybody has an input to this, that we need diversity in order to get things to work properly. So there's lots of stuff in there, but in this journey, there are points beyond which, without help, teams do not get, or people do not get. And these are what these little red warning triangles are. The first warning triangle, which is in the transition between the green zone and the red zone, is all about the ability to voice, the ability to speak, to release what you really feel, and to share that with others. It could be the courage to speak up. And we find that many, many people of all levels are often afraid to say what they really think, and particularly when there's a climate of fear because they're worried about losing their jobs. They are afraid of making career-limiting statements that might be remembered or held against them. And then, on the other hand, their CEO could be demanding innovation. So this is a point at which we have to help people to be able to change the way that they converse with each other, and to build in activities and ways of talking about innovation and talking with each other that will allow useful conversations to happen. The second warning triangle is the point, the threshold point, the point at which we decide we're actually going to leave the past behind. And coming down the left-hand side of this journey, if you look at the left-hand side of this graph, the journey from the first triangle to the second triangle is one of grieving. It is one of almost letting the past die. And it's very, very hard. It is like losing a lost relative and getting over that. So there is a lot of care work done in helping people to feel okay about a very different future. And important to that is helping them to learn new skills too. But there is a point, a choice point, at which people have to actually decide, are they going to embrace this change, or are they going to cling to the past? And those that cling to the past will really, really struggle. And those that choose to move forward will have to learn to be courageous and learn skills of prototyping, testing new ways, failing fast, and so on. But it really is like sailing a boat. In this journey, we have struggles with behaviours, struggles with learning new ways, struggles with speaking, struggles with seeing new insights. But there is no other way to do this. It helps us to reflect, to reimagine the world, but we can only reimagine the world if we can actually get in touch with our own imagination. And so it's a very personal journey. It's not something that you can do without it being personal. I'm just going to move on. So as we do this with teams, this is about helping the team to develop a team methodology to go on this journey together. So just as if you were going to go on a sailing expedition with a crew, then you need to learn to sail the boat. And so at Xenergie, we offer something called systemic team coaching, which is about helping the team to be able to sail that boat of change and to embed within them those new ways of working so that they don't necessarily become reliant on coaches all the time to do that. The kinds of things that we look at on that journey and the team would be, what is your purpose and your passion? A team needs to have a compelling purpose. You need to have a reason why you're doing this journey. And out of the journey usually comes something which is very, very personal in terms of burning ambition. Why do I work? It's not just about the money. It's also about making sure my family are okay, or that I can be a better person, or that I can make a difference in the world. So you're finding the real motivation of individuals is important, and not making assumptions about what motivates people. Building a story, building the culture together. What kind of organisation do we want? What kind of values do we have? What do we do at the moment? What do we want to have? What kinds of skills and actions do we need? What responsibilities do we have? What structures do we have? How do we make decisions? What policies do we operate on? So when we're looking at the dimensions of the organisations, we're looking at individual mindsets, we're looking at collective mindsets and how they connect, and we're looking at how the structures, and not just the hierarchical structure, but also policies, meeting structures, competency frameworks, just how we organise ourselves, that everything actually supports the real vision and the mission, but in the way that it is evolving. So it's not something which is handed down and told, that we are evolving this together. We are reimagining and recreating the organisation together through teams, and that we have teams across the organisation who are working at this. So this scales right across the organisation as you work with this methodology. Let me just pause for a moment for any questions. David, do we have any hands up at all? Any questions? You can, if you want to ask a question, you can use the hand up button, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question live.
So we have some hands up, Lorna. So I'm going to unmute Naresh. He's his hand up.
Devi. Hello.
From Bangalore itself, from a company called Kiosis. My particular question was, when you've shown the graph, which is a U-turn approach in terms of when a change is started, it starts with a great enthusiasm, and over a period of time when the visibility is not there, it dips down, and then it actually will be starting again once there is some external force. So I wanted to understand when the initiative is coming down, what kind of exercises that as a change agent should do really to energize and get back the change path right on track. If you can just go back to the next slide, the previous slide, that will help.
This one. Yeah. Okay. So let me just clarify something on this slide. I think your question there was how do you facilitate this journey, and what is the role of the coach in this? Was that largely the question?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, exactly. When it is actually coming down, so what kind of a thing that the coach should do to ensure the motivation is still on and then go up?
So, so the vast majority of the left-hand side of the curve here is all about letting go and grieving and releasing the past. So in order to release the past, you first have to acknowledge the past, or acknowledge what's happening. So there is a phase that we go through which we call downloading, which is getting people just to voice their experience of what's happening. And it's a huge emotional release. They need to say what they think, they need to say what they see, they need to say what they feel. And as they say it, that release happens. There are things around how they then start to change the conversation so that it becomes a more functional conversation. Because when you're in this first phase of downloading, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of blame. I'm just going to move forward one slide because it's a little bit explained on here. So I just see the red text coming up here. So when you start working with a team, their first port of call is to this kind of voicing, downloading, saying what they're thinking, feeling. But there's a lot of judgment coming out of it. So the letters VOJ stand for voice of judgment. And so the role of the coach is to help them to perhaps reframe what they are seeing, and to take their own responsibility within what is happening. So, you know, when this is happening, nobody is right or wrong. We want to shift people away from right or wrong, but instead to see everybody has a perspective. So as a coach, you're really facilitating the gathering of perspectives in order to see the whole, because each particular person or team will only see their part. If you're in the finance function, you will only see the world from the finance function's perspective. But in order to see the whole, you need to see all of the functions together, and understand with fresh eyes, and to release your judgment. As long as there is judgment in a conversation, it is going to prevent people from feeling really open to explore, because they're going to be afraid of being judged by others. And this is a very natural human tendency. So there's a lot of skill here in the coaching around getting the group to converse and function in a very different way that is non-judgmental. And so there's a skill set to be taught around listening, around communication, around feedback, around expression, and working with ambiguity. You know, that the glass may not be half empty, it could be half full as well. So how do you work with that massive ambiguity? And how do they take personal responsibility? There's something called transactional analysis that we use a lot at this stage, which is looking at the parent-adult-child relationship. Typically, you know, when we're coming into things with judgment, we're coming in with a feeling or a sort of stance which would be maybe more parent-like or more childlike. So, you know, do they feel like they're the victim? Do they feel like they're the perpetrator here? So we want to kind of balance all of that kind of psychological stuff that's going on, so that the group can reach a more reflective stance together. And that's where they're down towards the second triangle. They're really getting into that reflective stance, and they're starting to go, aha, we get this, we see this, right, okay, we know we have to release this now. And then it's a case of, you know, one by one, people just getting themselves to a place of readiness to make that shift. And the only way you can get here is by being able to facilitate really deep conversations with people and teams. You have got to be able to enable the unspeakable to come forward. and for the unspeakable to be said in front of people as well. And it's really difficult. It's really difficult for leaders. You know, the more senior you are, the more afraid you are of falling from from your high place. Leaders are afraid of getting it wrong. They are lonely, and they are worried that they don't have all the answers. And yet, once they go through this, they also feel a relief because they move forward with the support of their people, and they're not kind of trying to rush ahead and drag people with them. Now, it's, you know, I'm making it sound quite simple. It is not simple, and for those of you that are already in coaching, you'll know that this really is not simple. And so, systemic team coaching is a very complex methodology made up of systems thinking, coaching, process consulting, and strategy. It's made up of a number of things in addition to coaching. But what we are doing at all times is I suppose, pulling the resources out of the people that we are coaching and facilitating. But all along the journey, there will be a number of different kinds of interventions which they're actually worked on. So I'm going to say something about the training that we do for this in a short while. But maybe let's move on to the other question that we had there, and then I'll continue talking a little bit about the training. So the other question, David, who was that?
The other question came from Gaurav Jan, and the question was, understanding that VUCA is a representation of the external world, how do we make the people and teams realize this reality to prepare for change and transformation?
Yeah, a good question. Well, you see, there's a huge amount of denial about it. I think everybody will, excuse me, everyone will acknowledge the stress and the uncertainty, and innovation is a word which is all over the place these days. However, things like some of the, you know, the bigger, longer-term change initiatives are still largely held at quite a high level. So one of the things that we encourage is to engage people in actually looking outside of the walls of their organisation and see what's actually changing in the world. And because the vast majority of managers and leaders are still caught in short-term thinking and caught in their day-to-day reality, they are not spending nearly enough time actually going deeper into the realities of what's changing. So one of the things that we ask our clients to do is to go and talk to industry analysts, go and talk to their customers, go and talk to suppliers, and really get a broad and deep sense of how other people see the world changing. And once they do that, they start to realize, oh my goodness, the world is changing, and we do need to do stuff. And in the act of engaging themselves in interviewing and questioning their ecosystem or their stakeholders, has automatically engaged them in the process of discovery. And so this can be quite a transformational exercise, because that kind of work in the past has often been the realm of consultants. They've perhaps engaged a strategy consultant to go and do some research for them. But those that make the decisions have been, I suppose, almost clinically removed from the conversations that were had around what's changing. So the process of strategy development in this context is all about engaging leaders and managers in their own practical discovery, so that they're engaging themselves in the conversations. And this brings it home much more quickly. I'm going to stop there on the answer to that, but I hope that has helped to some extent. And I think we'll just move on and talk a little bit about the training that we offer in this and what's going to be happening in Bangalore. So if I can move my... yeah, so I love this slide here. The cave you most fear holds the treasure you seek. And this is what I always say to the clients. They say, oh, but we're really worried about going into those deep, dark places of difficult conversations. And I say to them, the cave you most fear has the treasure you seek, because honestly, when you reach those deep places, that's where the gold lies. So systemic team and innovation coaching is a new change in innovation approach for transforming organisations. So what we're doing is connecting people together through teams and connecting teams to teams in order to study what's happening, to go on a journey together. And you can do this with one team or you can do it with multiple teams. It increases, excuse me, on the one hand, the productivity and creativity of teams. So as you go down the left-hand side of that curve, the first thing that you're doing is improving team performance. That actually produces some short-term benefits, that things like problems which have been problems forever are suddenly solved. And you know, for example, in the manufacturing company where I've worked, just by getting the production line operating team to talk to the engineering team, you know, they were able to solve production line problems which had been hanging around for ages. They were solved really quickly, quite early on in the journey, because the guys were just able to talk to each other in new ways and be able to brainstorm solutions to problems. So there's some very, although this is a long-term journey, which could take, by the way, up to 2 years, potentially more, there are short-term benefits as soon as you begin the journey, and this is just by getting people to talk in new ways. So it increases productivity and creativity and drives better decision making, because we're getting people to think about what is the kind of decision that you need to make, and are you making that decision fast enough, and who's going to make that decision. Because if all the decisions are made at the top, then you're going to get into gridlock. And again, that's a very common problem, that there is not enough empowerment through the organisation, and so you can't try things quickly because it's too slow to get the response, and the world has moved on by the time the response has come. And the only way that you can speed up that level of empowerment is by building the trust between leaders and staff in the organisation, and that is all about the conversations and going on that journey together. So thirdly, this develops people hugely, and as you develop people, you develop culture. So instead of culture being something that is a sort of an afterthought or a reaction to the way we've managed the organisation previously, we're actually consciously trying to decide the kind of culture that we want and to plan and make that happen. So that all of the strategic change is actually happening through people and with people. And at the same time, you're raising people's level of thinking, their consciousness, above the problem. You're getting them to think about game-changing change, getting them to think about taking more personal responsibility for the way that they think, the way that they are in their work, at whatever level they are in the organisation. And you're connecting up from individuals right through to management and right through to customers, because the change methodology will involve you in working with your whole ecosystem, not just within the walls of your organisation. It works on 4 or rather 5 different quadrants. So this is taken from something from Ken Wilber, if anyone's come across the Integral Institute in Colorado. This is based on Ken Wilber's quadrants. And on the left-hand side are things which are the hidden stuff. So we talked about the stuff which was under the iceberg, the stuff that's hidden. So that's working on intention, individual intention and collective intention, culture and mindset. On the right-hand side, we're working with things which are slightly more visible. They're observable, behaviours and competencies, leadership competencies. And fourthly, the structures. What are the governance structures? How do we measure success? What kinds of metrics are going to be measuring? Is it just about production matrix, or actually going to start measuring matrices around people's behaviour as well? How will we know whether we're working in the way that we want to be working? And on the 4th quadrant is the circle around this, which is all to do with context, constantly staying connected to what's happening in the ecosystem and in the external environment, so working beyond the walls of the organisation. And a lot of this will involve cross-cultural work internationally as well. Again, that's the reason why we're speaking to you today, is that we believe that the need for international working will be greater than ever before, and so that we need to be able to work seamlessly across countries and across technologies sooner rather than later. So we're really, really excited about working with Sandhya and Sushil on this. So the approach brings together things like a convergence of things around coaching skills, process consulting, philosophy, systems thinking, group relations, psychology, quantum physics, neuroscience, team facilitation skills, team building schemes, and futurology, looking at what's going to be happening in the future. On the right-hand side, some names of clients that we've been working with here on this approach. One of our recent projects was been with a company called Pioneer Investments, who were there in the centre. We've been working in 13 different countries with Pioneer to help them look at their global operations and how to look at innovation for the company there. So there's some big names there. Biomedical research, technology, SES is part of GE Group, public sector, Southwark Council in London. Just moving on to the systemic team coaching program, which will take place we have an introduction to systemic team coaching, a 3-day certificate program, which will be happening in Bangalore on 15th to 17th of October. This is an introduction to a 12-month ICF accredited program, an advanced diploma. So let me just try and be clear about this for a moment. To train in the entire methodology that I have described on the webinar today, that is a 12 or 18-month training program, which will be held over 7 modules, and it includes a 6-month project application. So you train with us for 6 to 7 months and then implement your project on your client of your choice, or in your own organisation. And you are supervised and mentored through the application of your project. So that program, which is accredited by the ICF to advanced diploma level, that will be running, all being well, in India in 2016. For those that are interested in doing that 12-month program, there is a 3-day certificate program, an orientation to the 12-month program, which will be taking place in Bangalore, 15th to 17th of October. If you are interested in attending this, there are details on our website and also on TWES's website, Chapter 2's website. You'll find all the details there, how to sign up. And you can speak to Sushil and Sandhya as well for their for more information. Sandhya, would you like to say something about how you'd like people to sign up, or the questions, or anything else about the program on your side?
Thank you, Lorna. So those who are interested in knowing more, as Lorna said, you could directly write to info@Xenergie, or since we are local, you could always opt to call us. Our numbers are mentioned on the screen here, or you could visit any of these websites, Chapter 2 Coaching or TWES, and we'll be there to answer your questions. Okay, so we will send you these contact details afterwards. So if you haven't had time to write them down now, we will give them to you afterwards. So just to remind you, it's a 3-day program leading to an ICF accredited advanced diploma in systemic innovation coaching. It is, as I said, it's not just about coaching, it is also about consulting. If you're interested in deep change management consulting, transformational consulting, and working at an organizational level, this is a program that will prepare you for that work. The cost of the program is in respect of that as well. So the full program, to do the full program, is in the region of 10,000 euros. I haven't converted that to rupees yet. But if you look on the websites, the rupee equivalent is there. And to do the 3-day introduction in Bangalore, there are early bird offers. And if you sign up by the end of August,
there is a significant reduction of about €700. So if you are interested and you'd like to get the early bird, please get in contact with one of us or have a chat with us. If you're not sure whether this is for you and you just want to talk to us and get some more information and have a personal one-to-one, please get in touch. We're very happy to speak with you because we know this is a significant investment and we really want this to work in India. We see huge potential for this and we would love to have a cohort of people who are working with this methodology across the country and across Southeast Asia as well. So I'm going to pause there again for questions. Oh, just one more thing. Who will it be facilitated by? The coaches on, and the coaches and facilitators on the course are myself and Jerry Ryan. Jerry Ryan is an MCC with the ICF. It's a very, very experienced consultant and coach who's worked across manufacturing, technology, financial services, across sectors. You can find more about our biographies on our website as well. Questions? Got a question from Jane, Gaurav, Jane.
Yeah, so that was the second question, Lorna. The question was, transformation projects are multi-team, multi-leader, multi-dimensional changes with a definite timeline and expected return on investment. In such a scenario, how does one make the team and leader realize that this is also a personal journey within as much as an organizational journey?
Well, the road into these conversations is generally one where a leader is looking for answers to things. So we may often, if an organisation is facing an issue, what we might often do to begin with is do some one-to-one work with the leader just to help him understand what the journey is about. In my experience, the leaders today are far more aware of their own impact. There is plenty of research on the market today which makes the connection between the leader's personality and the leader's behaviour and leadership team's behaviour and the impact of the organisation. So it's not something that has to be proven because it has been proven. And it's the other answer I would give this to you is actually in the quality of the conversation that you have. Yeah, and that really, I suppose, is the strength of depth coaching, is to be able to have those very honest and real conversations with leaders. And most of them will agree. They know it. They know it inherently. They just need somebody that they can trust to work with on it. And so what they're looking for is for you as a coach and a consultant to be able to go there with them. And this is why I have to say that one thing I didn't say about our training approach for this is that this approach is about you as a change agent. It's not just about what you are going to do to them, the client. It is about you as a change agent, whether you are working internally as a change manager or whether you are a coach or a management consultant. This program is about how you are going to develop yourself to be a change agent, because if you cannot go there as a coach, you cannot expect a client to go there. So this will be deep work with yourself first, and as you change, as you develop, as you evolve, so your clients will have a very different experience with you. So I'm sure some of you are already doing quite deep work, but I'm going to challenge you and say that this probably our approach will take you to an even deeper level. And it is challenging. Even in our own organisation at Xenergie, we have been through our own systemic team coaching on ourselves. And I'm the CEO of the company, and I have to say, you know, for all the years I've been a coach and a consultant, I found it really challenging to go through it myself. And you know, but yet it was really, really beneficial, because I cannot take leaders and other CEOs there until I've actually been through this myself. So we want to take you on that journey, and And when you do that journey together, it is really, really developmental. So this will be transformational for you as well as for your clients, and it will completely reconfigure how you work with clients. And if you're involved in one-to-one coaching at the moment, it's going to really help you make that shift from being able to work from one-to-one to whole organization. As I said, it is really looking at kind of change management and change project management development and organization development, rather than just, you know, one-to-one coaching. This is a whole new paradigm. Any more questions? Or have we reached the end? Okay, thank you very much. I had a lovely note there from Gaurav Jain. Thank you. So thank you, Lorna. She feels enriched after this, so thank you very much for that. As I said, please do get in touch if you want more information. We're very happy to speak with you and to help you out. And we would love to see many of you on the programme in Bangalore, and we would love to make that possible for you and to meet you in person. So we'll leave it there. We will be doing more webinars, and so you'll receive links to further webinars as well. They'll be on slightly different subjects, but we will go over some similar concepts as well. So thank you very much for attending, and I hope to meet you in Bangalore. Goodbye.